This is episode 14 of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I'm Jeff Kaiser. My guest for February 2021 is Oba Frank Lords. Oba, thanks for being with me this afternoon.
What's going on, Jeff? How you doing? And thank you for having me.
Big fan of your work, going back from the late 70s, early 80s, all the way up through what you've been doing, which you really have
Thank you.
been working nonstop. So by following
Yeah.
following your career and stuff like that. So we got so much to get to. So let's go ahead and dive right in and start
Let's do it.
let's start talking about some of the early years. I know you kind of got your start in the 70s, maybe mid late 70s. So can you kind of talk about that time period for yourself?
Well, back then, I was pretty much a kid. I was like into, garage bands and punk rock and all that kind of stuff. So, I got a job as a stock boy and a warehouse boy at TK Records. That also included me working in the studio as like a gopher, get me some coffee, get me whatever, somebody's at the door type of stuff. And my fascination, just propelled from there because that's when I actually got to see how records got done. So, I've always loved music since I was pretty much born. But I had no idea how the actual production of a record went down until I actually worked there. So I was working there, but then I was amongst stars like KC, George McRae, Jimmy Bo Horne, Timmy Thomas. These were people that would just be walking in front of me on a daily basis. And there I got to see, that whole star status, but then when they would kind of like comfort up with you and become friendly with you, then, they were just normal people. So I got to see a lot of, a lot of what really went on behind the scenes as a kid, pretty much. And I would sneak into the studio late at night. Back then, they didn't have like computers or nothing like that to remember what you had done throughout the day, like a recall of a Pro Tools session, let's say, or whatever. The recall was actually a sheet of paper that you would write on the little pictures of the knobs of the board. You would write a little line where that knob was pointed to, if it was to 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock or whatever. So it was my job to actually go there and write every single setting that was left, at the end of the production day on these papers, right? So once I had it all written down, I already knew where these settings were. So then I would actually turn on the machines and start messing with all the buttons and screwing the whole thing up and then figuring out, okay, how does this make this echo, or how does this make this sound lower or brighter or crispier or whatever. And I would actually practice with, shake, shake, shake your booty. But, I'm here practicing how to engineer on an actual song. And then I would just put it all right back to how it was. And the next morning, nobody knew I had even been there, So it was, things like that made my childhood a little bit more interesting than the average kid,
Right.
Yeah. And like I said, I saw the greats there. I saw how they would create music and how they would put together music and how that would inspire, them to like do the next track or whatever. And, all that stuff just mesmerized me.
Did you think at that time you were going to start going in that direction yourself, or was it more just a kid and you were a fan and you were just pretty excited just to be there?
Oh no, absolutely. I was a music junkie from very early in my life because my dad loved music. And like even when we were in Cuba, before I came to the United States, my dad would play me like a ton of stuff from all the way from Benny Moré and Celia Cruz all the way to Gene Krupa and Benny Goodman. So my mind was very filled with music. It wasn't until I got to the United States, okay, that I actually remember the first American rock song that I heard was when my mom's cousin was driving us from the Freedom Tower, which was this place that they would take you to get processed when you would come into the country. She's driving us back to her house. You know, we're here in a brand new country, and we get into her car. It was a Mustang, okay, and AM radio. It wasn't even FM back then, and on the radio is Sugar Sugar by the Archies, okay. I will never forget that because it was the first time I had ever heard an electric guitar, you know, and I was like freaked out. I was like, what is this? So then my mom's cousin was a young girl. She was in high school, you know, she was like 17, I believe. And so she was in that age of listening to music. So the minute I got to her house, it was a barrage of records by Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, you know, you name it. Everybody that was hip back then. My mom's cousin was a groupie of theirs. You know, she was a teenage girl in high school. So this was the intoxication that I got then, you know. I mean, I just got shuffled into this whole new thing, which was rock guitars and amplifiers. And I was like even more blown away, you know, and the rest is me now. I am a product of that experience. Yeah.
And you can hear that in a lot of your music, just a lot of different influences from your
Yes.
life and things like that. And kind of in the early parts of your career, I know the first stuff you were probably on was more disco. The
Oh,
first,
absolutely.
were
Yes.
you listening to disco at that time, or were you kind of just doing it because it
Oh,
was just an opportunity?
no, no. I was listening to disco because it was in style. Okay, so it was the music of the era. So I mean, I was, like I said, my that lady, my mom's cousin, she was a fan of music. So she had a you know, she had like, there was no boundaries to what she was listening to, you know. And disco obviously was something that was coming in at that time. So, you know, that was definitely in the playlist. And then when I started working at TK, which I was much older, I was already a teenager, you know, that was it right then and there, you know. I mean, that was the sound. So I got to actually see the people firsthand, you know, some of these stars I like shooting the shit with, you know,
Right.
so to speak, you know.
What do you remember when you were in maybe like high school, early college? Were there any bands that you were seeing at that time, maybe friends or just local stuff that was going on when you were at that point in your life?
Yes, in the high school era, I was making that rebellious shift between disco and punk rock and new wave. Like I was leaving the disco scene and going into that whole other phase. So I was very attracted to the British groups. You know, like one of my favorite all-time groups forever has been Tears for Fears. And you know, Depeche Mode and all of those kind of new romantic groups. But then I had the Ramones side of me with the Sex Pistols and, you know, and all that heavy duty, you know, like punk rock and stuff like that. That was the era that really cultured me, you know, when it came to like my musical taste and what directions I wanted to go in. That 80s phenomenon, if you want to call it, that's what really like put my head where I wanted to go. So that's when I actually decided that I wanted to start experimenting with the European style production and all that kind of stuff, and adding to it my organic past, which was, you know, Afro-Cuban percussion, even on a religious level. And I started to fuse the two. Okay. And this was, of course, before freestyle music even was called freestyle music. Because back then it wasn't called freestyle, it was called dance music. Um, and that fusion that I started to work with is what gave birth to this whole Miami freestyle thing, you know, because I mean, I didn't even know I was doing freestyle. I was just getting, you know, very synth-based, European style music and adding Latin percussion to it. So it was giving it this twist, and then later on, a gentleman by the name of Frank Walsh, very famous music director from Miami. He's program director for Power 96, for Rhythm 98, and then some. He told me one day, just in a conversation, he's like, do you know that you have created this thing called freestyle here in Miami? And then I go, what is freestyle? He goes, well, the music that you're doing. And then I'm like, oh, I thought it was just dance music, and that's when I found out it had a name. This was like right around the whole Shannon era, when that whole thing started,
Right. I remember when I first heard the word freestyle to describe a genre, I was very confused. I didn't know what it meant. And it wasn't until years later I started to understand it was dance music, but was a different kind of dance music. So when you hear the word freestyle, and I know listening to a lot of your early stuff, there's a lot of almost like a synth pop kind of sound to it. I think a lot of the freestyle acts or bands at that time, I don't think they were as synthy as Secret Society was. So I know you had done some stuff before Secret Society. So was that just because of what you all were listening to? Were you listening to more, like you said, more like the Depeche Mode, the Tears for Fears? Is that where that influence kind of came from?
Well, I'm gonna butt in and say that the major difference between Secret Society and, I would say, all the other freestyle bands or groups or acts, if you want to call them, is that we were a band. Okay, so we were actual real musicians playing real instruments, not just a cute little girl or a cute little boy that somebody picked to sing over somebody else's voice, which that was going on a lot in the freestyle era back then. So we were musicians creating music, and our music was very jazz related as well, because we were real musicians, we were a band creating songs, with musical content, not just lyrics and all the pretty little romantic stuff that was going on. So that kind of gave us this edge, that we were a little bit different than the average freestyle group. So our productions, required multiple hours in the studio because we were recording live musicians, and all this kind of stuff. And then when we would perform, it was like a concert. It wasn't just one person singing to a track. It was very different, to experience, And this is where I think Secret Society had a little bit of a, different path than the average freestyle group that was out back in the day. On the second album that we were recording, we even ran into problems because we didn't want to do that little bubblegum type of music. Already our music was heading, we were even taking drum machines out of it and recording real drums, like live drums and stuff like that. So we were heading more for a pop type of, arena type group. And then, the breakup came along and that messed the whole thing up and whatever. But yeah, I don't even consider Secret Society a freestyle group, period. You can't really compare it to like Stevie B, let's say, for instance. It was very different.
That's what I love about that group, is it was different, had a different sound to it. Was that, there was another band you were in prior to Secret Society. Was that
Silent Prayer?
Silent Prayer. I don't think Silent Prayer put out anything official.
We didn't. We recorded a record, an album, okay? And the story behind Silent Prayer is very interesting, because that band used to play in a club called the Beat Club, okay, in Miami, which was a club that actually, brought people like Dominatrix and Shannon and big time groups, over there to play. Lisa and everybody. Two Life Crew debuted there. Oh my God, the list just goes on and on. But anyway, we used to play at this club, okay? And there was another group that also played at that club called Perfect Strangers. Okay. The guys in my band, okay, were kind of limited when it came to, you know, their musicianship. So I was dealing with people that were not keeping up with me with the kind of music that I wanted to do. And then I meet this guy that's a singer for this other band, Perfect Strangers, Rudy Gill, okay? And his head is kind of in the same ballpark as mine when it comes to the music that we're doing, that he wanted to do and that I wanted to do. So at that point, I broke off from Silent Prayer, okay? And Rudy broke off from Perfect Strangers. Now, in Perfect Strangers, the bass player, okay, Eric Tallman, okay, went and joined all the guys that were in Silent Prayer with me, and they became Erotic Exotic, okay, which was that other Miami group that was a band as well. We never competed against each other because we were all very good friends, okay? So we were almost like sister groups, you know? They went on and did their thing. They went on and had their slew of hits, you know, and me and Rudy went on and had our slew of hits. But even our music was different. Their music was more along the lines of that Miami, you know, teeny bopper type freestyle. Ours was getting more jazzy and more intricate as, you know, as the records would go on. So that's what happened to Silent Prayer. They became Erotic Exotic.
Who was coming up with some of these names? Was it more of just was it a group?
They were mine. The names are mine. Yeah. Because if you notice, they're all religious. They're all spiritual. So Silent Prayer, you know, was a name that I came up with. And Secret Society was also a name that I came up with because of my religious things that I do, you know, as far as my Afro-Cuban religious priesthood that I have.
I was thinking there was a connection there, but I wasn't sure what
Yeah.
it was. So it sounds like the connection,
Yes.
the common denominator was you. So,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yes.
you know, Secret Society existed during that MTV big period, although I don't remember there ever being a video for Secret
No.
Society.
And it was funny. We didn't like videos.
Okay.
Like we were into fashion and all of that kind of stuff, but we didn't like videos. Okay. It like we were into this, I don't know, some stupid mentality that it was, you know, selling out or whatever, you know, that, you know, if you came out on the video and you're all glamorous and stuff, you know, it's not about the music. So we were into that stupid mentality at that point. But then people would get videos of our shows and create their own videos, which was the weirdest thing because we did have, there's some videos out there, believe it or not, okay, like made up little, you know, videos out there of us just being ourselves, and they would put the music in the background, you know, like our music in the background. So people would make up our videos for us, you know. But we never really got around to doing that whole video thing. And I regret it because that band, not only did it sound great, it looked intense. That band was a very, you know, like when you would look at us, you would be like, whoa, you know? So we had colors in our hair. I mean, everybody thought we were from England. You know, they would never imagine that we were Cuban kids from Miami, you know?
I'm so glad you said that because when I've played Secret Society for other people, they are, one, they don't know you're from Miami, and two, they're like, oh, did they have a video on MTV? I said, no, I don't think so. I don't
No.
remember ever seeing one. And yeah, I don't know if that would have changed the trajectory of the band, and maybe that would have given
Oh, yes.
more of a name.
You know, let me tell you something. The biggest mistake that we made was not putting out videos and not joining that whole MTV thing, because I know for a fact that band would have definitely taken off like big time, you know. It had what it took, you know, and even on a local or national level, we had, you know, groupies that made it look like we were the Beatles, you know. I mean, we're talking about, you know, little girls screaming and passing out in concerts and stuff like that. So the band had the everything it needed. All it needed was to make that jump. But then myself and Rudy, we did not click. We weren't really like fusing. He was more about just whatever, and I was more about getting things done and spending my time with them and nurturing them and all that kind of stuff. So he wasn't putting in as much work as I was, and then he was the spoiled singer, so he would get to the studio late when the song was pretty much done, and then just come in and record his parts and leave. When I was doing the whole forging, and I kind of like got a little bit of tired of that stuff, and then he made the crucial mistake of wanting to record a solo record on his own, but he did it behind my back. And that's when everything just like, that was it. There was 2 breakups in the band. There was one breakup after the Too Blind to See album, which was our first album, when stuff got to his head and he thought I'm Michael Jackson or whatever. And then the second breakup came after the whole success with We Belong Together, and when the band got really big, then he decided to go and do a record on his own behind the back of the group. So when we found out that he was doing this, we were like, this is whack, forget it. And the rest is history. I moved on and continued doing my stuff, and I haven't really heard much of stuff that he's done, but right. I don't stop.
Sure. What do you think it would take to bring everyone together for a reunion?
To be honest with you, I've been asked that a few times. I tried it a few years back and it blew up in my face, and I just don't have any interest in it, to be honest with you. Gotcha.
Yeah. So in the height of the band, I'm sure there was a lot of different clubs and venues you played throughout Miami and stuff like that. So, and just thinking also even broader than that, if you had a chance to do any touring, thinking about the different places you've played, what memories do you have of that period?
Man, they say that if you remember the 80s, you really weren't there. Okay. So, I am definitely gonna use that as my Fifth Amendment. I plead the Fifth. We had success at the level of like big bands. Okay. Our success was not, a little thing. I mean, I'm talking like I would be in a movie theater, for instance, and somebody would come in with one of those little, box paper cameras that you would buy at Walgreens and want to take a picture of me inside of a dark movie theater, I would have to call, let's say, for instance, my mom from the street to ask her if there was people waiting for me outside of my house so I could get there. And then she's like, well, it's down to like 10 girls now. And there was actually girls outside of my house with signs and posters and waiting for me to pull up, So the success was amazing. Okay. It was actually mind-blowing. Every club that we played at, okay, half of the people would stay outside because the capacity, would not allow them to come inside. So, I mean, all the clubs were packed. There was clubs that would actually book us, half a year in advance. They would pay us in advance, okay, for 6 months down the line to do 2 or 3 shows at their venue. That's how busy we were, we wouldn't stop. We would play probably 4 or 5 days out of the week because a lot of clubs back then were open like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and even Sunday, Here in Miami, the club scene was amazing, and in New York as well. So we were back and forth all the time, constantly, hopping here, hopping there, we did tours that would, consist of us going, like, let's say, for instance, up, the East Coast or whatever, stuff like that. And most of it was, just the demand of the clubs. I remember when We Belong Together became #1, in New York, there was a radio station called Hot 97, and they were playing that record every hour on the hour. And so we were hired to go and play at this gigantic club called the Palladium, okay, which is now, I believe, the dorm for NYU, for the University of New York. And this club's capacity was, I believe, 6,000 or 7,000 people, okay, and it was overpacked. There was more people than actually they permitted in there, and we were live on the air. So I remember this club used to have like this steel curtain, like the old theaters, okay, that would ruffle up and you know, it would fold up or fold down as they would open it, right? But the steel curtain was very thick. So we're standing behind the curtain as the lady from the radio station is, you know, announcing us or whatever, and we hear like this rumble, okay, like actually like if the place was shaking, okay. And as this curtain starts going up, the sound is coming in from underneath it, and there was so much screaming that my hair was moving, and I was like in shock because I was like, holy cow, look at this. And then when the music started and the people started singing, you know, every single word of our song to us, you know, 6,000 plus people singing your music at you is a very impressive sound, you know. And we're just freaking out because this would happen almost every other day to us, you know. So as a kid, you know, that was my dream, but when it actually hit me, I was like, wow, is this real? You know, I don't even think I drove a car much, because everywhere that we would go was in a limousine. So, I mean, my car was just parked there, you know.
So when that all kind of started to slow down and the group started to kind of go on the outs, where was your head during all that? How were you feeling? Because you reached that success with Secret Society. How were you feeling after that kind of started to simmer down a bit?
Well, the Secret Society thing came to an abrupt halt because we broke up. So it's like we didn't slow down. We broke up in the cusp of our success. Like right when we were about ready to put out the next album, which what we had recorded, we were signed to Vision Records. Okay, this was after we got off of Polygram, which that was a whole mess, you know, because they signed us basically to shelf us. Okay, because we were giving problems to another artist that they had called Sapphire. And they needed to get us out of the way, basically. So when we recorded that next album with Vision Records, we were about ready to put that out. Our management had plans to take us on this gigantic South American tour, which that was going to blow us up, you know, immensely, because that was a whole new world right there. And then, you know, like I said, the singer comes out with this, you know, thing where he went behind our back with the actual label and recorded a single, you know, because the record that we were putting out was way too jazzy, and the label was tripping because they were like, this is not going to work because your fans are not going to, you know, they're not going to like this, whatever. And I was dead bent. I was like, this is the kind of music that I want to do, and this is the direction that I want the band to go in, and that's that, you know. So Rudy got in cahoots with the label behind my back, and they recorded a single that was very like Miami Freestyle bubblegum, almost like I'm desperate to get on the radio type of thing. And that blew up in his face, because when they took that to the program director says, is this Secret Society? He goes, no, it's Rudy Gill. And he goes, oh no, we want Secret Society. We don't want Rudy Gill. And the record never got anywhere, you know? So that's how that band broke up. So that hit me like a tidal wave. Okay, first of all, I was a brand new father. Okay, I had just had my first child. So I was used to living, you know, this high life of, you know, of extravagance, and then all of a sudden that stops. And then, you know, as a young man, you're not thinking of putting away money in the bank or none of that kind of stuff. I was just partying, you know, and having a good old time. So when the money stopped coming in, I freak, you know, and my then wife, which I have to appreciate that for the rest of my life, tells me, you know, I'm gonna go and get two jobs, two part-time jobs, and you need to go into the studio and reinvent yourself. You know, because if you did it once, you can do it again. So I went into the studio, and then I said, okay, I'm gonna go after my roots now. And then that's when I started to create this thing called Latin Express. Okay, and that was pure Afro-Cuban. When there was no such thing as Afro-Cuban house, there was no such thing as tribal house, to be honest with you. I was already, you know, bringing in like African chants and African percussion rhythms and intricate patterns that, you know, nobody had heard of, that was not in those religions, you understand? So I was bringing in like actual real religious music and fusing it with house music back in that time, you know? And the success was amazing, you know? Before Latin Express, though, I had a brief moment where I played in another group, which also blew up huge, called Dogma. Okay, this was a group that was created by Joe Granda, which, you know, Granda Entertainment, Granda Promotions, he's the manager and creator of Nice and Wild, a great friend of mine and all that. We created this group called Dogma. Dogma and the Afro-Cuban Rhythms, it was called. And that group had a song called Más Suave, which became huge. Okay, as a matter of fact, in the MTV, back in the MTV days, there was this show called Club MTV, which Junior Vasquez was the DJ of. And there was this one show specifically that Madonna was there, and Junior asked her live on, you know, on the show, asked her, what song do you want me to play? And she's like, I want you to play Dogma Más Suave. So she herself asked for it. And that just went, that just like catapulted us, you know? And that group was very big in the gay scene, you know, like the gay industry really embraced that group, because the group was like almost like a spectacle. It looked like a circus. I mean, dancers and costumes, and the thing was like highly produced. And that went on for a while until, you know, I put out this record called Descarga, which myself and my dear friend, my brother Giuseppe D, producer, remixer from New York, we created the record. And the record was basically a Spanish chant, okay, over this pulsy type of house beat. And Tony Moran, okay, the singer slash producer, Tony Moran, he fell in love with the record, and he had a label back then called Rambunctious, and he put that record out. And that record just went to #1, straight to #1, in a time when trance music really was in, you know, like it was all about that very Emma Chaplin type of, you know, orchestrated opera trance type stuff, you know. And here I am doing stuff in Spanish or even African chants, you know, completely different from everything that was happening, you know, at the moment. And it hit. And that catapulted us to the next hit that Latin Express had, which was a record called Chango, which that was immensely huge. That got Ricky Martin's attention. And Ricky, you know, hired myself and my then partner, Albert Camera, to remix She Bangs. Okay, and that was a huge hit. And then after that came Gloria Estefan with Out of Nowhere, which that got us a Grammy nomination. A bunch of huge artists, John Cicada, oh my God, so many artists I can't even remember. We remixed in a year, I'd probably say about 50 records for different, you know, huge artists. Celia Cruz was one of them, you know. So that was another immense period, okay, of Oba Frank Lords. But it was a complete change from the Secret Society. I went into another realm, no European sounding stuff. It was all cultural, organic, you know, tribal house, you know. No more freestyle. I never did another freestyle record for years, you know, after that whole thing happened with Secret Society. So that was the next endeavor, Latin Express.
Were you doing a lot of this at, you mentioned New York. Were you doing this at different studios, or was it more concentrated at your own studio at that time?
Well, in the Latin Express era, was when computers and stuff like that started to become a thing in studios, you know, and it wasn't about the big, you know, boards with the big reel to reels and stuff like that. So home studios started to become a thing. And we basically had a little home studio at my manager's house. I recorded the vocals and the percussion to Chango inside of a closet, like with actual coats and shirts and pants on my left and my right side, that we just pushed them to the side, and that was the vocal booth, you know. So we had our own, you know, home studios. In the Secret Society era, it was all about those big studios. So we were recording most of our stuff in the same room that the Bee Gees and Fleetwood Mac would record in Criteria.
I was wondering about that, and thinking about that time and how big Criteria was, especially with a lot of huge artists like that coming in. How much recording did you do at that studio?
Oh my God. Almost everything that Secret Society did in the first maybe 4 years of Secret Society was recorded there. So, I mean, there was a large amount of time that we spent in that studio, a large amount of time.
You have any memories?
Because our productions were also very big. So, you know, I mean, the average record would take us, I don't know, 60, 70 hours collectively, you know, of course, spread around in two or 3 days, or 4 days or whatever it would take. But, you know, we would take a lot of time recording a specific song. So, you know, we were spending a lot of money doing that. Back then, it was $125 an hour, you know, just for the room, not including the engineer. But we were also making that kind of money too. We weren't making, you know, we were doing shows for $10,000, you know.
So thinking about the different gear you've been buying over the years that you've had, what is some of your favorite type stuff to use?
The Roland stuff I love. Okay, like I used to have the Juno, you know, the Jupiter, all of the Roland synths. That was Secret Society 101, was, you know, all that. I like the Yamaha stuff also, but I was very much of a Roland dude, you know, especially with like, you know, the drum machines and stuff like that, like the 808 and the 909 and all that. Then, you know, samplers and all that kind of stuff came out, and the SP1200 and, you know, those kind of things, you know, came out, and we were experimenting with that as well. I wasn't really too much into the electronic thing because I was more of an organic type of guy. I wanted to hear a real guitar. I wanted to hear a real, you know, whatever violin section if possible. But we made do, you know, I mean, and before you know it, you know, we were creating songs with these sounds, you know, and they were just there, so we were using them, you know. And I mean, we had all this money, so we were buying keyboards and keyboards and keyboards. And I remember sometimes in the studio you couldn't even walk because there was so many keyboards, you know.
Is there anything you have from your recording days that's been with you for the longest period of time that you still use?
Yeah, my drums. That I have drums that are older than my kids. You know, I have drums that are 40 some odd years old, 40 some years with me, you know. So yeah, I mean, that's what I have. The synths and the keyboards and all that. Not too long ago, I threw away a Juno 106 that I had inside of a storage, and it was all beat up, so I just threw it away because it wasn't even working. But no, all that other stuff, you know, I don't even remember what happened to it, to be honest with you. I think, you know, when the breakups and all that kind of stuff, the management sold equipment here and there, and that's how it, you know, got dispersed.
Yeah.
But I didn't keep any of it though.
Sure. Thinking about the time periods that we were talking about, uh, you were definitely around and pretty present. I'm sure when the rave scene was going on. What are some of your
Oh
memories
yes,
of that period?
that was crazy because that came at a time when I was doing the Latin Express thing, right, which was completely organic, and then rave was completely electronic. So, I mean, of course, I get influenced with my surroundings. You know, I mean, if I move to Russia, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be doing some kind of polka music before long. You know, because it just influences me. So when that whole rave thing started to happen, I created this group called Child's Play. Okay, which that never got anywhere. It We did play a bunch of raves. You know, actually we opened up for Rabbit in the Moon, I think they're called. Um, we opened up at one giant rave for them. So this group was basically two percussionists, myself and another percussionist, but we weren't playing any real organic instruments. We were playing trash cans and bicycle parts and things that you would find in the garbage. Okay, it was cages made up of these paint cans and the whole nine yards, right? Like those plastic paint cans that they play a lot in the streets in New York? Okay,
Yes.
well, we had a setup of these things, okay? And then it had two dancers, two rave dancers and a gymnast, okay? Was also in the group. Now, the reason why it was called Child's Play is because it was all like drum and bass and jungle and all that stuff, but the lyrical content was my little daughter, which was at the time, I believe, 5, singing nursery rhymes, like one little, two little, three little Indians, or what's it called? Mary had a little lamb, whatever. And she was singing this, and it sounded eerie. It sounded like Children of the Corn, because it was like a little girl, singing over this like real dark rave stuff. And that would have worked, except for the fact that the rave scene was just a mess. Everybody was tripping on drugs. There was no real seriousness there. I had a few bad experiences at the concerts and stuff with things of that nature. So I was like, you know what, this is a little bit too much for me. Plus the music drove me nuts. Okay, I couldn't take more than 2 hours worth of that kind of it would just drive me nuts. So I just like stopped that you know entirely. I kept it as a memorable thing in my life, and that was it. And then I continued with the Latin Express thing. That's what I really focused on at that time.
I also know, that in that time there was a pretty big festival in Florida called the Winter Music Conference. Did you ever
Hmm.
check that out? Did you ever play any of those type of gigs? Maybe not that one in particular, but was there any kind of big gigs like that you had played at that time?
Oh yeah, well, the Winter Music Conference, okay. um I went to the very, very first one, okay, which was back in the time when they used to have one in New York called the New Music Seminar, okay. And the Winter Music Conference was actually started by a gentleman called Bill Kelly, uh, a DJ from Miami, and he owned a record pool, okay, a very famous record pool back then called Flamingo Record Pool. Bill Kelly was the person that put out the first Secret Society single and album. Okay, so since he was basically our label back in the very beginning, I was involved with every single Winter Music Conference that was out back then in the 80s. Okay, so I played at every single one of them. Uh, Naturally, we got awarded. The Secret Society was huge. So we were the talk of the Winter Music Conference pretty much. Every year. Um, and I mean, I've been in panels and multiple panels on the Winter Music and different Winter Music Conferences through the years. Been very much a part of that. I actually remember, in the very first, I believe it was 3 or 4 ultras, okay, were part of the Winter Music Conference. And you would get it with the ticket that you would purchase for the conference. And then if the Winter Music Conference was held at the Fontainebleau Hotel in the beach, and you would just walk into the beach, and that was where Ultra was. Okay, and it was like small Ultra, you know, it wasn't big. And I was part of that as well. Okay, so yeah, I definitely got my share of the Winter Music Conference history.
Who were some artists at that time you were into?
That I was into?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm so diverse. I've always been into, like, for instance, like David Bowie, okay? But then I like Prince, you know? And back then in that era, I remember listening to a lot of Tears for Fears and a lot of those kind of, you know, European pop groups. I was also getting into like deep African music, like from Africa, you know? So I was listening to a lot of that kind of stuff and trying to, you know, bring out some sources of that into my music too. I've never really been like a, you know, like a, I'm into this kind of music or that kind of music kind of person. I'm into so many different kinds of music that some people, you know, look at, like, for instance, I have a CD thing in my car, you know, when I go driving, I like to pop in CDs. And when they look through my CDs, they're like, oh my God, you're all over the place, you know, because I'll have like the Carpenters, you know,
Okay.
greatest hits right next to Barry White's greatest hits, right next to, you know, I don't know, something like David Bowie or Ice House or
Okay.
something like that, you know, and everybody's like, you're so diverse. And then I'm like, well, to me, music is just, you know, what feelings sound like. So I'm not into a genre. I'm into the feeling that it gives me, you know, when I hear it. And some days I want to hear rock, and some days I want to hear classical, you know.
Right. Right. And I asked that question too because I know that you've done a cover of Personal Jesus by Depeche Mode.
Yes.
I don't know if there's a lot of covers you've done, so that one really stood out to me. So what is it about that song that made you decide to cover it?
Well, it's funny because I'm also a priest, like I was saying, okay, of two Afro-Cuban religions and Native American shamanism as well. So I attend to a lot of people on a daily basis when it comes to healing and, you know, giving them advice on how to fix their life or whatever, you know, through these spiritual things. And a lot of people have called me their personal Jesus. Okay. I mean, literally just like that. You're like my Jesus because you saved me through this thing or from this sickness or from whatever. Okay. And Depeche Mode, of course, being one of my favorite groups, okay, when I did Dark Beat, okay, with Oscar G and Ralph Falcon, we put out a record right after that called All Right. And then I needed to do a third track. And I was like, since I have this idea of using Personal Jesus, I want to do it very much like Dark Beat, okay, with that kind of sound. And I don't want to do the whole song. I just want to do the chorus of the song. And I set out to do it, you know, and it sounded cool, so I put it out, you know. But that, if you really listen to that, the whole meat and potatoes of the song is Afro-Cuban percussion, like Santeria percussion is playing behind that track, you know, in a 6/8 type of rhythmic pattern, which is very weird for house music, you know. So it kind of like was interesting, but I don't think people got into it too much. I think people were like kind of like, I don't know what this is, you know. And I love covers. Don't get me wrong. I have a few covers that I have done that I haven't put out yet. You know, like I did a cover of Cerrone's Supernature, okay, which is very cool, very different. I haven't put that out yet. And then I did a cover of Bad Girls with Katia Shea, the singer. That came out. That did pretty good too. I love covers, you know. I actually was gonna do a record called My Way, okay, which was going to be a collection of covers done my way, you know.
Nice.
And I never really got around to finishing it, but you know, I've done I did a cover of Here Comes the Rain Again, which sounded like Marilyn Manson, so it was completely, you know, weirded out.
Yeah.
A cover of Mad World by Tears for Fears. I've done a few covers, you know, I just haven't put them out yet.
Yeah, that's what I love about your style is that, you know, you're influenced by so much and you're into so many different types of music that even though the original sounds this way, I know that if it's your version, we're going to get a lot more percussion, maybe a little bit of tribal sound, and maybe a little bit of
Yeah.
darker sound. So you mentioned Katia Shea. Hopefully I'm pronouncing her name right. And some of my
Katia Shea.
Katia Shea. Some of my favorite
Yeah.
stuff that I've heard that you've put out in recent times has been with her. Talk about that relationship a little bit.
Well, we started producing music for her. The first stuff that was done was very on a soulful type of level because she was very into a whole R&B type thing before she met me. She was doing a lot of that Mary J. Blige type stuff and all that, and even rapping and all that. So the first things that I did for her were very much on the soulful house tip. But then one day she heard the Afro-Cuban stuff that I was doing, and she's like, I want to do that. And then I'm like, really? And then I'm like, okay, because I had not had a female protege, okay, to work with when it came to that style of music. So I said to her, well, you know, the first thing I got to do is teach you phonetically how to pronounce these words because they're, you know, they're African words from Nigeria. And she caught it like that, and like immediately, you know, and the way she mimicked the sound of how you're supposed to sing that because it's a very nasally type of thing. She grabbed it immediately, and then that just like was a rush of inspiration for me because I was like, oh wow, now I can really, you know, let loose. And I mean, I was just producing track after track after track after track. And then came Oscar G one day to me, and Oscar actually gave me a song for her to sing that was on his album, My Life. Okay, the song was called My Life. And I showed him the stuff I was doing with her. And then he's like, well, I want to open up a label called Made in Miami. And I want this song that we did called Asoyi. I want this song to be the first song on the label, but I also wanted to set the bar for the tone of what the label is going to sound like, you know, and the rest is history. I mean, me and Katia Shea have more songs on Oscar G's label than Oscar G himself. You know, I mean, there's so many songs that we've done, you know, because it was, I just could not stop. I could not stop. Actually, a song just came out yesterday, but it was on Nervous. A song called Don't Stop with Katia Shea, done with Jacob Colon, and I have remixes on it. Oscar G has remixes. Another group of remixers called Espinal and Nova have a remix on it. So, like I said, I couldn't stop, you know, producing. And then, you know, she has a lot of sex appeal. You know, she's fiery. She's, you know, she's also rocky, you know, rock and rollish as well. She's got this tough attitude to her as well. So we blended perfectly, you know. It was almost like a female me doing this stuff. And then I kind of like pushed myself back a little bit and let her take the forefront. Then we created this concert thing called Ache, which is ACHE, which is an acronym for Afro-Cuban House Experiment, okay? But Ache is also a word of my religion that means like almost like blessings onto you, you know, like the breath of God, you know. It's almost like saying amen, okay? And this concert is basically the fusion of Afro-Cuban music and Afro-Cuban folklore with house. So Oscar G is actually on stage with us playing the music as a DJ, and then musicians playing over the music and singing, her singing, me singing, and dancers in folkloric costumes and all that kind of stuff. So it's like this whole gigantic, you know, production of Afro-Cuban visual and sound that we created as well. We had a slew of concerts and things all up until COVID came. And then when COVID came, we stopped, you know, because obviously, you know, clubs are closed and all that. So that has us kind of on hold. But I think for probably the summer of this year or the fall of this year, we might be doing some concerts overseas and stuff for this Ache thing, because it's already kind of like trickled over there, you know, and people are beginning to like want it, you know, like in South America and stuff like that.
I was going to ask, how has the pandemic really impacted you, considering that you're also a live performer too?
It's horrible. I mean, I have not played live in a club since COVID started. You know, we have a residency with Oscar G on Monday nights at a place called Coyo Taco in Wynwood, Florida. And another place on Friday nights called 1-800-Lucky, which is also in Wynwood. The one on Mondays, we had already been 5 years doing this every single Monday night. That place was like a religious occurrence. You know, I mean, people were there no matter what on Monday nights, okay? And on Friday nights as well. We have not played. We have not done it since. So it has affected us, you know, financially it's affected us, obviously. But to me, it's like I feel like a fish out of water because, you know, I haven't really played. I've done a lot of recordings, but I haven't really played, you know, like I used to play 2 days out of the week. We used to play 2 hours and 2 hours nonstop, you know, every single week for 5 years. So imagine, you know, I'm going crazy in my house. I don't even know what to do anymore. You know, I'm like, I want to leave.
Is that where your studio? Is that where your studio is in your house?
Yes, that's where I'm sitting right now, in my studio. Yes, in my home.
How many hours a day do you spend there?
Well, right now, not many, because, you know, I'm a little bit bummed out, you know, because like I said, I want to get out of the cage type of thing, you know.
Right.
But sometimes I could tell you the most, my record, okay, for not walking out of a studio has been, I believe it was 78 hours, okay, like continuous, okay, without leaving, without taking a bath, without nothing, just inside the cave and not leaving the studio, you know, and things being brought to me, you know, coffee or whatever, you know, food. Like, you know, they throw it under the door and close the door because it's like, don't even walk in there. That man's going to bite your head off, you know? So, yeah, I spent a lot of hours in the studio, a lot.
During that point when you spent that many hours, what was the output you had done during that time?
Oh, man. I just got, right now, I just got I think it's a 10 terabyte hard drive, because my 5 terabyte is full, okay, from just 2 years worth of, you know, of stuff. So you can imagine the amount of stuff, because like when I do a song, I don't just do the mix. I do a dub of that, you know, I do probably an alternate remix to it. You know, depending on if it's one of my songs, I might even do, like, for instance, when I went ahead and did the second coming of Darkbeat, you know, the Decade of Drums version, I did 17 different versions of Darkbeat.
I know.
You know,
there's a lot of them.
And I sometimes I listen to them and I'm like, what the hell was I smoking when I did this? Because it's like, where did this shit come from? You know? So, but, you know, I go crazy like that sometimes, you know, and then I'll hear so many different versions that I cannot possibly put them into one. So then I do 17 versions, you know? So, you know, yeah, I mean, Once I'm inside the studio, it's like, to get me out of here, you got to start a fire or something, you know, to get me to get out of the studio, because it's addictive. I mean,
Yeah.
it's compulsive. You know, I go hours and hours and hours, and I don't even realize what day it is. You know.
I can imagine. And you know,
Yeah.
you having been, you know, obviously in percussion, drummer, you know, vocals and production, is there something apart in that you just love more now than ever? That's like your true passion?
Well, percussion has been my passion all my life. Anything that's a drum, you know, from building it to playing it, you know, has been my passion. Now that I'm older and now that I understand music, you know, even on a theoretic level, okay, just the way that music, you know, gets put together, I don't know if it's in my head or just in any other person's head. It to me fascinates me, you know, because I start a song and I already have an idea of what that song is going to sound like when it's mixed. And then it's seeing it come to fruition, you know, every instrument, every sound, every syncopation, working with the other syncopation. To me, is just like, I don't know. To me, it's godly. You know, I just feel like music is a whole universe in its own. You know, I mean, I don't even know how to explain it. I get into the zone in music that sometimes, like for instance, when I play live, I close my eyes, and people are asking me, how come you don't miss the drums? Your eyes are closed completely, and I'll have my eyes closed for an hour, okay? And I'm like, because I'm feeling my drums, you know, I'm not seeing them, but I know they're there, you know. And sometimes I play better when my eyes are closed because it's just my ears now that are doing the whole spectrum for me. So I'm hearing every single little layer of my drum head where I hit, if I hit it a little bit to the left or I hit it a little bit to the right, I'm hearing different notes. And it's just this whole thing going on in my head, you know, that I don't know of any other feeling that's better. I mean, I don't know of any other drug that gets me higher. I don't know of any sexual partner that has given me a better orgasm than what I've had with music. I mean, to me, music is just everything, you know, at least that comprises me, everything.
Right.
And I'm always walking around humming, like, and people are like, what are you doing? I don't know. What song is that? It's not a song. I'm just humming,
Right.
you know, it's constant, you know. I hum when I chew my food, like I'm eating, I'm, you know, doing that kind of stuff. And people are looking at me like, dude, don't you stop. I can't.
have, have you ever been humming and you said to yourself, I need to get into the studio and get this down?
Oh yes, no. My favorite thing of these new phones nowadays is a little memo recorder, because I'll be driving, because I love to drive, you know. Um, I'll be driving and I'll have 30 ideas at the same time pop up in my head just because I drove by something and I heard a sound, let's say. Something like I don't know, a mechanical device pounding into the street or something. And all of a sudden I hear ding, ding, and I'm like, oh shit. And then I grab my phone and I'll record that there, you know. And by the time I get home 10 hours later, because I go on these long drives to like North Carolina or whatever, I have 100 memos on my phone of things. And then I start to take them apart and start to record.
Wow.
And that's how I do it.
Yeah. Uh, I love that. I love hearing about that. And you know, one thing I wanted to also ask, kind of get back to, you know, because you know, you being around as long as you have you had someone along there with you to kind of guide you along your journey? Did you have like a mentor, someone you were kind of?
I've been lucky, yes. I've been lucky to have, you know, from back then, and like in the, you know, TK days, I was around, like I said, you know, these great artists, you know, watching them record, you know, and how they would do things, you know. So they weren't directly teaching me, but I was learning from watching them. Um, I had, you know, people like Celia Cruz give me advice. You know what I'm saying? Major, major, major artists, you know, that I've had the privilege of working with, playing with. So yes, I have, you know, and then most of my mentors have been from me listening to their stuff or paying attention to their records, you know, like the Afro-Cuban singing. I learned it from listening to this man called Lazaro Ross, which is he's dead now, a very famous, prolific Afro-Cuban singer of the traditional type of religious music. So as a kid, I would listen to him all the time, and mimic him until I got those tonalities out, you know? And, you know, so a lot of my mentoring has been from that. Listening to producers, for instance, like, you know, Trevor Horn, what do you call it? Maurice White from Earth, Wind and Fire, you know, listening to how they would put together music and breaking apart their productions, you know, as I'm listening to a record, you know. So yes, I've had a lot of that kind of mentoring. In my life, everything that I have acquired has been through sweat. Okay, I've never gotten anything easy. Nobody ever like said, "Oh, I'm going to give you $1 million so you can put out your record." No, I had to actually work for that money, you know, and pay it myself, you know. So I basically earned every single thing that I have, and I don't have a problem with that, you know. I don't really owe anybody any favors, you know, because if they've done any for me, I have paid them back very well. So basically, I've been my own man, but I've always been a student of life. You know, I look at, you know, great musicians or great prophets or great men, you know, and use their, you know, practices and what they've done and apply it to myself, you know, on a general level, you know. Yeah. I was also a martial artist for 18 years, so I have a lot of that discipline in me when it comes to my musicality. Like when I'll get into a studio and I'll be falling asleep, but I will get up and say, no, I got to finish this, you know? So that discipline comes from the martial arts, you know, part of me where, you know, my stamina, you know, was tested all the time, you know, and I would give myself more power. And therefore now I use that same philosophy when I'm going to create music. I'm not going to stop until I'm done, kind of stuff. So when I start a record, I finish it. You know, I don't leave it there and it's there rotting for 5 years. You know, no, I finish it immediately.
And as we kind of close out a couple of things here, you know, one thing too, you mentioned about getting different advice from people over the years. You know, what's been that greatest piece of advice you were given? And maybe on the other side, what's a piece of advice you would give someone who was maybe looking to get into the music industry, just maybe the way things are now, on both sides of that?
Well, like I said, I've had great people give me advice, like Celia Cruz, for instance, okay? Celia Cruz told me once in a studio, she said that, you know, she said to me, if you are not ready to leave every single thing, person, or, you know, thing that you love aside for music, you're not ready to become a famous musician. She told me that, and that resonated inside of me because I have had to live that. You know, I have had to break up relationships that didn't understand, you know, the fans, the girls, the groupies or whatever. I've had to, you know, leave women that I loved, you know, because my career demanded my time and they wanted my time too. So, you know, that resonated in me. There was also he was not a famous musician, you know, my godfather of the religion, the man that actually, you know, I was drawn to the religion because he used to build drums. Okay, he told me on a spiritual level, you know, he told me, if you do not become part of your instrument, okay, your instrument will never appreciate what you're doing to it. And I didn't understand that. And I was like, what do you mean appreciate? You know? And he goes, the day that you learn every single piece of the surface of your drum is the day that you will become part of your drum. Okay, it's almost like how you know your hand and how you know how your fingers look and your body and all that kind of stuff. The day that you learn your instrument like that, like if it was a hand or an arm that belongs to you, is the day that your instrument will appreciate what you're doing to it. And man, that is so real, because when I play my drums now, it's almost like my drum is giving me the sound, and it's an inanimate object. And people are like, what are you talking about? I'm like, it's alive. I'm telling you, it's alive, because it's a frequency, you know? So that frequency, now that I understand it, now that I meld with it, you know, and I'm part of it, you know, it's almost like that drum is just an extra extension of my finger, you know? My finger ended right here. Well, it continues from there on, you know, my body is still there, and it's that drum, you know? And the other advice that I got from a gentleman, may he rest in peace, called Blowfly. And I'm sorry, my phone just fell. And Blowfly, which was a very interesting character, okay? He told me, you know, if you're gonna do music, don't do it because you think it makes money. Do it because it makes you happy. If you're not happy, you're not making music. And that could not be more true. Because to me, I would do my career for free. I have actually played on records for free. I have done many concerts for free, you know, like building myself up. I had to do it for free because nobody wanted to pay me. So that's how I would promote myself, you know. But the payment that I would get from doing this was the happiness that I would get while I was on stage, or the rush of the people screaming or whatever, you know. So I feel like, you know, I can wake up in the morning and go do my job for free, happy as a pig and you know what, okay? Now, the fact that I get paid is a blessing, because how many people wake up in the morning and are like, oh my God, I gotta go see this stupid lady that answers the phone. I gotta go deal with my boss. And they go to work hating life. You know what I'm saying? Me, no. I go to work loving life. To me, my work is my escape from life. It's my escape from all that other realistic BS that I don't want to even deal with, you know? So the fact that I get paid to do it, I won the lottery, you know? And Blowfly told me that. He's like, if you're not happy, you're not making music. This is the reason why I will not go on stage and do Secret Society. And they've offered me large sums of money. I'm talking very large. The last amount of money they offered me was $50,000 just for me to get up on the stage and play. And I said, no. Why? Because I'm not going to be happy. And $50,000 is not enough money to get me somewhere for 2 hours where I'm going to be unhappy. Yeah. You know, I'd rather stay home watching TV.
I gotcha.
You know, so yeah, those are advices that I've gotten, you know, and I mean, a million more that I can't remember, but yeah, sure. I've been very blessed to have beautiful, wonderful masters, okay, of the music industry in my life that I have had, you know, throughout my career, which I just turned 40. Is it 40? 1980? Yeah, 1980. I started professionally in 1980, so I'm 40 years now, right? In the music industry.
That is 40 years, going on 41.
Exactly. So I just turned 40 in my, you know, musical path. And it's been a long 40, but it's been a very blessed 40, I have to say.